Hi everyone, this is immigration attorney Abhisha Parikh. I'm a nationwide practicing immigration attorney working out of my office here in New Jersey. Right now I'm working from home due to the current COVID crisis. I wanted to come on here because last night the president signed the executive order banning certain immigrant categories from applying for a green card here in the US. So let's just get right into it. So what I'm going to do in this video is that we'll walk through the entire text of the proclamation together to get an idea of who exactly this is going to affect. And then at the end of the video, stick around. I'm going to really just summarize the entire proclamation into layman's terms, just going over each and every category, especially the questions I've been getting lately from B1 to K1 to spousal green cards, who exactly is affected. So we'll lay it out in simple terms at the end of the video, but I do want to walk through the entire proclamation with you. And then if you have any questions, leave them down below or contact my office for a consultation and we can discuss further. So Section 1 states, suspension and limitation on entry. The entry into the United States of aliens as immigrants is hereby suspended and limited subject to Section 2 of this proclamation. Okay, so key word here is immigrant. And for those of you who may not know, an immigrant is someone who is seeking to come into the U.S. as a permanent resident. So basically, they're looking to come in to obtain a green card. All right, and now we move on to Section 2. Scope of suspension or limitation on entry. The suspension and limitation on entry pursuant to Section 1 of the proclamation shall apply only to the aliens who. So now we're going over who this applies to. 1. Aliens who are outside the U.S. on the effective date of this proclamation. And just so we all are on the same page, this proclamation was signed last night, and it goes into effect tonight, April 23rd at midnight. All right. 2. Those who do not have an immigrant visa that is valid on the effective date of the proclamation. And 3, do not have an official travel document other than a visa, such as a transportation letter or an appropriate boarding foil or advance parole document that is valid on the effective date of this proclamation or issued on any date hereinafter that permits him or her to travel to the United States and seek entry or admission. Okay, so let's take this one by one. So this goes into effect tonight at midnight, like I said, and it applies only to those who are outside of the U.S. So anyone who is applying for an adjustment of status here in the U.S. is not affected. This only applies to people who are going through the consular process. Okay, so this includes anyone who's waiting for an interview at their local consulate, has an ongoing process, anyone who's outside of the U.S. and does not have an advanced parole or any proof of legal documentation that can show they are allowed back into the U.S. After this proclamation goes into effect. It does not apply to anyone who already has an immigrant visa. So if your immigrant visa is done and you've just been waiting to come into the U.S., you're not subject to this since your interviewing is already done and your case is already approved and you have the visa in hand. This only applies to those who do not have a visa on the date of this proclamation. Okay. Now let's go into the exemptions. All right, so we're at Part B now. The suspension and limitation on entry pursuant to Section 1 of this proclamation shall not apply to. So these are the categories that will not be affected by this. So the suspension and limitation on entry pursuant to Section 1 of this proclamation shall not apply to, number 1, is any lawful permanent resident of the United States. Okay. So this does not apply to you if you already have a green card. So if you have even a 2-year card and you're looking to remove the conditions on your green card, this proclamation does not apply to you. So you will not be affected by the suspension on green cards. If you have a 10-year card and you're looking to renew your card, again, this does not affect you. All right. 2, Any alien seeking to enter the United States on an immigrant visa as a physician, nurse, or any other healthcare professional to perform the medical research or other research intended to combat the spread of COVID-19 or to perform work essential to combating, recovering from, or otherwise alleviating the effects of COVID-19 outbreak as determined by Secretary of State, Homeland Security, and any spouses and children under the age of 21 that would accompany such an alien. Okay, so basically, US government is saying that if you're a doctor, if you're a nurse, if you're a researcher, or if you in any way, as a medical professional, can help with this fight against COVID-19, you are still permitted to apply for an immigrant visa. So these professionals will still be eligible to get a green card at the local consulate based on their designation as a physician, nurse, or researcher, or any other medical professional that is going to assist the U.S. in the fight against COVID-19. Narrow category, but from this we can see that the U.S. is trying to keep the doors open to those individuals and professionals that can assist the U.S. in this time of crisis. Okay, number 3. Any alien applying for a visa to enter the United States pursuant to EB-5 investor program. Okay, EB-5 investors bring in the money into the U.S. These are $1 million investments at minimum, and so they don't want to stop the flow of income into the U.S., so EB-5s would be exempt. Also under EB-5, majority of applications are required to create an X number of jobs. So allowing the investors to still come in will only produce more jobs in the U.S. market for U.S. citizens. Okay. Number 4, any alien who is the spouse of a U.S. citizen. Okay, so whether you're here in the U.S. or whether you're outside of the U.S., if you are married to a U.S. citizen, this proclamation will not apply to you. So if you're in the middle of a consular process at the local consulate, your application will continue as is. All right. Next, any alien who is under 21 years old and is the child of a U.S. citizen or who is a prospective adoptee of a U.S. citizen. So on children under the age of 21 will not be affected. Next, any alien whose entry would further important United States law enforcement objectives as determined by Secretary of State, Homeland Security, or their respective designees, and on a recommendation of the Attorney General or his designees. All right, pretty straightforward and a pretty narrow category. Any member of the United States Armed Forces and any spouse and children of a member of the United States Armed Forces. Next, any alien seeking to enter the United States pursuant to the special immigrant visa category. And last, any alien whose entry would be in a national interest as determined by the Secretary of State, Homeland Security, or their respective designees. So the last few are pretty straightforward. One thing I wanted to address is I had a few questions regarding fiancé visas, whether they would be affected because technically, they would be coming here and applying for a green card. So no, fiancé visas will not be affected by this because fiancé visas are considered a non-immigrant visa category. And as we saw earlier in this proclamation, non-immigrant visa categories are not affected by this. But hold that thought because there is something written in here in this proclamation that I feel foreshadows changes to non-immigrant visa categories in the future, and we'll just get to that in a bit. But for now, non-immigrant visa categories are safe. So if you're here on a B1, B2, or you're looking to apply for a B1, B2, student visas, H-1B visas, L visas, those are all safe right now under this proclamation. You can still apply for asylum and refugee status. So asylees and refugees are not affected by this proclamation either, okay? And we'll move on to section 4 now, termination. So this proclamation shall expire 60 days from its effective date and may be continued as necessary. Whenever appropriate, but no later than 50 days from the effective date of this proclamation, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall, in consultation with the Secretary of State and Secretary of Labor, recommend whether I should continue or modify this proclamation. So as far as the timeline goes, this proclamation will be effective for 60 days or 2 months, and at some point, but no later than 50 days, the president will meet with the secretaries and determine whether this proclamation should be extended further in the future. It is a huge possibility, especially considering this administration's anti-immigration agenda, but we'll just have to see how this unfolds. Effective date, as I mentioned earlier, this proclamation is in effect at 11:59 p.m. on April 23rd, 2020. So it goes into effect tonight. Now, what I hinted to earlier regarding the non-immigrant visas being affected next, I'm going to post the text here for Section 6, which states additional measures, and I wanted to read this with you all. Within 30 days of the effective date of this proclamation, the Secretary of Labor and the Secretary of Homeland Security, in consultation with the Secretary of State, shall review non-immigrant programs and shall recommend to me other measures appropriate to stimulate the United States economy and ensure the prioritization, hiring, and employment of United States workers. So what we see here is that the president is not done. For now, he's touched immigrant categories. He's cut almost a third of green card approvals that would normally take place by cutting out certain employment and family-based categories. And this section hints that he's going after non-immigrant visa categories next. So if these measures are not enough, you could see other visa categories being affected. And what I would think he would come after first would probably be the H1 categories, the L categories, perhaps STEM OPTs. But we'll have to see, because this is pretty generic and pretty vague, but it definitely does foreshadow more changes to come in the next 30 days. And we'll just have to see which categories are going to be impacted with these changes. For those of you who do not know which of the categories, visa categories, are considered non-immigrant, I'm going to post them right here for you to see. All right. Now, lastly, what I wanted to do, summarizing who is affected and who is not affected, just sort of put it in layman's terms if you're here watching this video concerned about a specific visa category. Okay, so now to summarize, here are the categories that are safe and that are not affected by this proclamation. First, those applying for an adjustment of status here in the U.S. 2, anyone inside the U.S. applying for any immigration benefit. So this includes EADs, etc. 3, K-1 visas. 4, B-1, B-2 tourist visas. 3, outside of U.S. citizen spouses and children under 21 of U.S. citizens outside of the U.S. If you are outside the U.S. and applied for a temporary visa program. Medical professional, physician, nurse, researcher applying for an immigrant visa, and this includes their spouses and children who will accompany them. Right? And lastly, EB-5 investors. So all these categories that are usually the most asked about are all safe. Okay, so now here are the categories that will be affected by this temporary suspension. Spouses and children of legal permanent residents who are going through the green card process at the consulate. So if your spouse is a green card holder and you are outside of the U.S., your case will be impacted by this temporary suspension. So you could see some further delays in your case. If you're married to a legal permanent resident and you are here in the U.S., you would be applying for an adjustment of status. So in this case, your timeline won't be affected. This only applies to consular processing for spouses and children of legal permanent residents. Second, brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens who have an ongoing consular process. Number 3, children of U.S. citizens who are over the age of 21 and married children of U.S. citizens, because neither one of those were mentioned in the exemptions. It clearly stated children under 21. So married children and children over 21, that category will be impacted. And lastly, employment-based immigrant visa categories that are applying for an immigrant visa outside of the U.S., unless you fall into the exemption of being a physician, nurse, researcher, or any medical professional that is going to enter the U.S. To help the U.S. government in this fight against COVID-19. Okay, so that is my summary on the proclamation. Like I said, there is probably more to come as far as changes go in the upcoming weeks. So I will be sure to keep you posted. If you have further questions, please contact my office. Leave me some questions down below. I will try my best to answer them at the earliest. If you found this video helpful and you would like more immigration videos, please hit the subscribe button so you can be notified each time I upload an immigration video, and give me a thumbs up below. All right, take care. Thank you for watching.